Be me, Ian, 37. Lead engineer at a mid-sized tech company. Let's call it Innovatech. Decent place to work, or at least it was. Paid well, interesting projects, minimal corporate BS. The dream, right? I managed the core infrastructure team, the guys who kept the lights on and built the engine that the whole car runs on. Not the flashy UI guys, not the slick marketing people. We were the foundation. My team was about 10 guys, myself included. We'd been working together for years, a well-oiled machine. You could drop a catastrophic system failure on us at 3 a.m. on a holiday, and we'd have it patched and running before the first customer even noticed. That's not bragging, that's just a fact. We were good at our jobs. We weren't a bunch of frat bros, just professionals who respected each other's skills. The social dynamic was simple. You do your job well, you're good. You don't, you're not. Meritocracy. Our unofficial second in command was Ethan. Ethan was a quiet genius, one of those guys who looks like he's staring into space, but he's actually running code in his head. He was the sole guardian of our legacy system, a monstrous tangled beast of old code that was written a decade before I even started. It was also the system that processed 100% of our company's revenue. No Ethan, no money. Simple as that. He was the only one who dared to venture into its depths, and the only one who ever came back with what he was looking for. Countless times, the C-suite would come up with some brilliant new feature, and the new hire hotshot coders would spend weeks trying to integrate it, failing spectacularly. They'd finally give up, and the project manager would sheepishly walk over to Ethan's desk. Ethan would just look at them over his glasses, take a sip of his cold coffee, and nod slowly. He wouldn't say a word. He'd just turn back to his monitor. A day later, he'd send a one-line email. It's done. And it would work. Perfectly. Every single time. The guy was a wizard. A quiet, unassuming, coffee-fueled wizard. Then there was Eddie. Eddie was the youngest on the team, barely in his mid-20s. Sharp kid. Learned faster than anyone I'd ever seen. He reminded me of myself a decade ago. Full of energy and hungry to solve problems. I took him under my wing when he started as an intern, saw the potential right away. He wasn't just book smart. He had a genuine intuition for logic and systems. The rest of the guys were a mix of seasoned veterans, all competent, no-drama professionals. Our project delivery stats were the best in the company, always on time, always under budget. The CEO loved us for that. He'd parade our success metrics in shareholder meetings. We weren't isolated either. We worked closely with other departments. The project managers were mostly women, same with the quality assurance team. We had a great professional relationship with them. No drama, no politics, just mutual respect built on getting the job done right. They'd spec out a project, we'd build it. QA would test it. We'd fix the bugs they found. A simple, effective workflow. For years, things were stable, comfortable even. We were making a good product, getting paid fairly for it, and working with people we respected. It was a good life. Then came Joanna. It started with an all-hands email from the CEO a few months back, announcing our new Chief People Officer, a fancy title for head of HR. The email was full of the usual corporate fluff. Thrilled to welcome Joanna, a wealth of experience in transforming workplace cultures, guiding us into a new era of dynamic and inclusive growth. My internal translator just read it as, "Get ready for more meetings." I didn't think much of it at the time. HR was always just the department you dealt with for payroll and benefits. How much damage could one person do? That was my first mistake. Joanna's introductory email landed in everyone's inbox the next Monday. It was a masterpiece of meaningless jargon. She talked about leveraging synergies, fostering psychological safety, and deconstructing legacy paradigms. I think I saw Eddie physically recoil from his screen. We all had a quiet laugh about it in the team chat and then got back to work. Her first week, she went on a listening tour, they called it. Basically, she just walked around the office with a tablet, observing everyone like a scientist studying an ant farm. When she got to our section, the engineering pit, she stopped. You could see the change in her expression. Up until then, she'd had this bright, practiced corporate smile. Looking at our 10 desks, all occupied by men, her smile tightened. It became a thin, judgmental line. She didn't say hello. She just stood there for a long moment, slowly scanning each of us. Her eyes paused on the sci-fi posters on our walls, the whiteboards covered in complex system architecture diagrams, the empty pizza boxes from a late-night deployment. She made a few quick taps on her tablet, a look of grim satisfaction on her face, and then walked away without a word. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. The first real change came a week later. Mandatory weekly seminars, for everyone, no exceptions. The topic of the first one was building a better Innovatech. It wasn't about building a better product, it was about us. Joanna stood at the front of the conference room with a slick presentation behind her. She talked for an hour straight. She never mentioned our department by name, but her meaning was clear. She spoke about the dangers of homogeneous environments and groupthink. She explained how teams that lack diversity are prone to stagnation and aren't truly innovative. She kept using the phrase toxic masculinity, describing it as a subtle force that could make a workplace feel unwelcoming to others. She said it wasn't about overt actions, but about an atmosphere created by a dominant group. The whole time, I could feel the eyes of people from other departments drifting over to our team. We just sat there, stonewalled, listening. At the end, there was a Q&A session. No one said anything. The silence was heavy. Joanna scanned the room, a challenging look in her eyes. No questions, no thoughts. I decided to speak up. I kept my tone respectful and professional. I asked how these cultural initiatives would be measured against our existing performance metrics, which were already the highest in the company. I asked if there was data to suggest our team structure was negatively impacting product quality or delivery timelines. Joanna's smile was gone. She looked at me like I was a child who had just asked a stupid question. She replied that some of the most important things can't be measured on a spreadsheet. She said that focusing on empty metrics was exactly the kind of old paradigm thinking she was here to change. She said our goal should be to build a company that felt right, not just one that looked good on paper. The non-answer was deafening. It told me everything I needed to know. Data didn't matter. Performance didn't matter. Only her ideology mattered. The seminars continued, each week a new flavor of the same message. We were the problem. Our success was not an asset. It was a symptom of a sick culture. The team's morale started to dip. The guys were grumbling. They were professionals. They took pride in their work. Being told that their hard work and efficiency were actually part of a toxic system was a deep insult. Then came the one-on-one meetings. Joanna scheduled a 30-minute check-in with every single person in the engineering department. My turn came on a Wednesday afternoon. I went into her glass-walled office and sat down. The room felt cold and sterile. She started by saying the meeting was a safe space for me to share my honest feelings about the company culture. I told her I thought the culture was fine. We were focused, we were productive, and we respected our colleagues. That wasn't the answer she wanted. She started asking these strange, loaded questions. How do you, as a male leader, actively make space for non-male voices in technical discussions? I told her I make space for the most logical voice, regardless of who it comes from. Do you recognize that the way your team socializes might be exclusionary to people who don't share your interests? I told her we sometimes grab a beer after a tough project, and that anyone who helped on the project was always invited. But what if they don't like beer? What if they find the atmosphere of a bar to be emblematic of a patriarchal power structure? I was floored. I didn't even know how to answer that. I think I just stared at her. The whole conversation was like that. It wasn't about work. It was an interrogation, an ideological purity test. I tried to steer the conversation back to our upcoming projects, our technical debt, our hiring needs. She would just nod, type something on her tablet, and then ask another invasive question about my privilege. I left that meeting feeling exhausted and angry. Later, I talked to the other guys on the team. They all had the same experience. Ethan, in his typical fashion, apparently just answered every question with a one-word answer or a grunt until his time was up. Eddie came out of his meeting looking genuinely shaken. He said Joanna had asked him if he ever felt pressured to conform to the team's masculine norms. She was trying to turn us against each other. The next phase of her plan became clear when we tried to hire a new database admin. We had an opening, and we needed someone good. The database was another critical piece of our infrastructure. We interviewed a dozen candidates. One guy was a rock star, absolutely perfect for the role. Years of experience, aced the technical test, great attitude. The entire team was unanimous. He was the one. I sent my recommendation up the chain. In the old days, that would have been it. An offer would have gone out the next day. Instead, I got a meeting request from Joanna. She had the candidate's resume on her screen. She told me that, while his technical skills were adequate, he wasn't a good culture fit. I asked her to elaborate. "Ian," she said with a sigh, like she was explaining something very simple to a very dense person. "Look at your team. We cannot, in good conscience, add another person of the same demographic. It would send the wrong message." I asked her what message that was. The message that we don't value diversity. I told her we valued competence, and this guy was the most competent person we'd found. She said we'd be reopening the search. She told me to bring her candidates that would add to our diversity, not detract from it. So the position sat empty for months. Our databases started creaking under the strain. The existing team had to pick up the slack, working longer hours to cover the gap. A project got delayed, then another. For the first time since I'd become lead, our department's metrics started to slip. And in her report to the CEO, Joanna used that dip in performance as proof that the old way wasn't working. She presented it as a result of the team's resistance to change and lack of innovation, not as a direct consequence of her blocking a critical hire. It was maddening. She was setting the fire and then blaming us for the smoke. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her destroy the best team I'd ever worked with. I requested a meeting with the CEO. I prepared for it meticulously. I built a deck with charts, graphs, data, project completion rates before and after her arrival, ticket resolution times, system uptime percentages. I laid it all out for him on the big screen in his office. I showed him, with hard data, how our performance was being directly impacted by the unfilled role. I explained the team's morale problem. I told him about the seminars, the weird one-on-one meetings. I chose my words carefully. I didn't attack Joanna personally. I just presented the facts. I ended by saying that my team is the most valuable asset this company has, and that the current HR strategy was actively damaging that asset. The CEO just sat there, steepled his fingers, and looked out his big corner office window. He was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to me and gave me a weak politician's smile. "Ian, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I really do." He told me that what Joanna was doing was bigger than spreadsheets. It was about positioning Innovatech as a forward-thinking industry leader. He talked about brand perception, social responsibility, and attracting the next generation of talent. He said there might be some short-term friction as we transition to a new cultural model. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I need you to be a team player on this. Get on board. Trust the process. Joanna has my full support." That was it. The moment I knew we were alone. Management wasn't going to help us. They were the ones driving the bus over the cliff. I walked out of that office with a heavy heart. The sense of betrayal was immense. Years of loyalty, of late nights, of hitting impossible deadlines. It meant nothing. We were just pawns in their corporate image game. The atmosphere in the office got worse. The whispers started. Words like restructuring and redundancies floated around the coffee machine. It was obvious where the axe was going to fall. Joanna had been building her case against us for months. My guys felt it too. The mood in our pit went from stressed to funereal. People just came in, put on their headphones, and coded in silence. The easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by anxiety. I couldn't let it end like that. One evening, I sent a message to the team's private chat. "Bar across the street, my treat." Now, everyone showed up. We found a quiet booth in the back. For a while, no one said much. We just nursed our drinks. Finally, I broke the silence. I laid it all out. My conversation with the CEO, the hiring freeze, the performance reports being twisted. I told them I didn't know exactly what was coming, but it was going to be bad. And I told them that management had made it clear they were not on our side. I looked around the table at each of them. "The only people we can count on right now are the people in this booth," I said. "This team is more than just a name on an org chart. We built this place. Whatever happens, we face it together." There was a shift in the air. The anxiety was still there, but something else returned, a spark of the old solidarity. Ethan, who had been silent the whole time, raised his glass. "Together," he said. It was probably the most he'd spoken all week. We all raised our glasses and clinked them. It wasn't a solution, it wasn't a plan, but it was a promise of loyalty. We walked out of that bar knowing we were on our own, but at least we were on our own together. The very next day, the email landed from Joanna, Chief People Officer. Subject, an important all-hands meeting to define our future. Mandatory attendance. Tomorrow afternoon, conference room, Omega. Everyone knew what it was, execution day. The morning of the meeting felt like the calm before a storm. The air in the office was thick with unspoken tension. No one was making small talk. The usual morning chatter by the coffee machine was gone. It was just the quiet hum of servers and the click of keyboards. My team was a picture of silent professionalism. Every one of them came in on time. They sat at their desks and worked. But I saw what they were doing. They were documenting their current projects with obsessive detail, writing handover notes, cleaning up their code, committing their final changes. They were like sailors securing the ship before abandoning it. No one told them to do this. They just did it. It was a matter of professional pride. They wouldn't leave a mess for whoever came after, even if they despised the reason for their departure. Around noon, I saw Eddie methodically copying his personal dot files from his work machine to a flash drive. He caught my eye and gave me a small, grim nod. I nodded back. Ethan was doing the same, only he wasn't just backing up files. He was printing out key diagrams of the legacy system's architecture, stacks of them. He carefully placed them in a neat pile in the center of his desk. It was a final silent gesture. Here's the map to the dragon's lair. Good luck. He knew no one else could read it, but he left it anyway. An act of pure principle. I spent the morning in a series of short, quiet conversations. I walked over to the project manager we worked with most, a sharp woman named Sarah. I gave her a verbal rundown of our project statuses, where all the critical documentation was, what the immediate next steps were. She looked at me, confused. Ian, why are you telling me all this? We have the status meeting this afternoon. I just told her it was always good to be prepared. The look in her eyes told me she understood more than she let on. The clock on my monitor ticked closer and closer to 2 p.m. At 1:55, I stood up. I didn't have to say a word. My entire team stood up with me. We walked towards conference room Omega together, a silent procession. Other employees were filing in from their departments, whispering amongst themselves, casting nervous glances our way. We took our usual seats in the back corner of the room, a solid, united block. The room was packed. Joanna and the CEO were at the front, standing by a podium with the company logo on it. The CEO looked nervous, fidgeting with his tie. Joanna, on the other hand, was glowing. She radiated an unnerving level of self-satisfaction. She looked like someone who had just won a long and difficult chess match. The lights dimmed slightly and a presentation appeared on the giant screen behind them. Innovatech, a new direction. The CEO tapped the microphone, the feedback squealing for a second. He cleared his throat and gave a short, rambling speech about the importance of being agile and proactive in a changing marketplace. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as us. He finished by saying he was incredibly excited about the future, and then awkwardly introduced Joanna as the architect of our bold new chapter. Joanna stepped up to the podium, her smile wide and beaming. She started by thanking everyone for their hard work and dedication. The words dripped with insincerity. Then she launched into her prepared speech. It was a victory lap. She spoke of breaking down ossified structures and challenging unconscious biases. She talked about how the most difficult decisions are often the most necessary for growth. She painted a picture of a new Innovatech, a vibrant, diverse, and equitable workplace that would be a beacon for the entire industry. My guys just sat there, their faces like stone, unmoving, unblinking. I watched Joanna, and I realized she genuinely believed she was the hero of this story. In her mind, she was the brave reformer, dragging a backwards company into the light. She wasn't just doing a job, she was on a mission, and we were the dragons she had to slay. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of corporate platitudes, she got to the point. To achieve this new vision, she said, her voice dropping to a serious, deliberate tone, we must realign our talent and resources. This means making some structural changes. While these moments are never easy, they are critical for our forward momentum. She picked up a sheet of paper from the podium. The room held its breath. As of today, the following individuals' roles have been made redundant, and they will be leaving Innovatech. She read the first name. One of the best back-end guys on my team, a man with a wife and a new baby. He didn't even flinch. She read the second name. Our network specialist. The guy who had literally built our internal network from scratch on a shoestring budget 5 years ago. She continued down the list. 3 more names, all from my team, 5 of my 10 guys, wiped out. Not for performance, not for cause, for demographics, for ideology. When she finished, she looked up, a look of solemn pride on her face. She was expecting a reaction. Tears maybe, anger perhaps. What she got was absolute bone-chilling silence. The entire room was frozen. The 5 men whose names had been called just sat there, staring straight ahead. Joanna's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. The silence was not the reaction she'd rehearsed for. She tried to recover. We thank them for their contributions and wish them the very best in their future endeavors. HR will be providing them with support and resources for their transition. She looked out at the silent crowd. This is a pivotal day for us. A day we begin to build a more inclusive... That's when I stood up. I didn't knock over my chair. I didn't make a scene. I just rose to my feet calmly. Every eye in the room swiveled to me. Joanna stopped talking mid-sentence. Her mouth hung open slightly. I looked past her, directly at the CEO. I wanted him to see this, to remember this. Then I turned my gaze to Joanna. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence in the room was so complete that my normal speaking voice carried to every corner. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice steady and cold. This is a pivotal day. I took my employee ID badge from my belt clip. The plastic made a soft clicking sound in the silence. I placed it on the empty chair in front of me. You've made it clear what you value. It's not performance. It's not loyalty. It's not competence. I paused. My team built the core of this company. Those men you just discarded are the reason the lights are still on. Her face was a mask of disbelief, quickly hardening into anger. And this team, I continued, is loyal to its own. We stand together. So, you can consider this my resignation. Effective immediately. A collective gasp went through the room. Before Joanna or the CEO could even process what was happening, another person stood up. Ethan. He didn't say a single word. He never did. He just stood, took off his badge, and placed it on his chair. Then he looked at me and nodded once. The CEO's face went from pale to ghostly white. He knew exactly what Ethan's departure meant. He knew who kept the money machine running. Then, Eddie shot up from his chair, his eyes blazing. He was young, and his anger was hotter, less controlled than mine. He pulled his badge off so hard the clip snapped. He threw it on his chair. I work for Ian, not for you, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. He looked at me, a look of fierce loyalty in his eyes. A heartbeat later, the remaining 2 members of my team stood up. Badges on chairs. Click. Click. Then, the 5 men who had just been fired stood up as well. There we were, 10 of us. The entire core engineering department standing in silent defiance. Joanna was sputtering. This is incredibly unprofessional. You are all in breach of your contracts. The CEO finally found his voice, a strangled, panicked squeak. Ian, wait, let's talk about this. Don't be rash. I ignored them both. I turned to my team. Let's go, I said quietly, and we walked out. We walked out of that conference room in a single file line. The rest of the company employees parted for us like we were Moses splitting the Red Sea. Their faces were a mixture of terror and awe. We didn't go back to our desks. There was nothing there for us. We walked straight to the main exit. The security guard at the front desk, a good guy named Frank we'd always chatted with, just stared at us. One by one, we placed our laptops and company phones on his desk. We're done, Frank, I said. He just nodded slowly, his eyes wide. We walked out of the glass doors and into the afternoon sun. The 10 of us stood on the pavement for a moment, blinking in the bright light. The silence was broken by one of the fired guys, a dry-witted coder named Ben. Well, he said with a sigh, I guess I'm buying the first round. A wave of relieved, tension-breaking laughter went through our group. We were unemployed. We had mortgages and families and uncertain futures. But we were free, and we were together. We went to the same bar across the street. This time, the mood was different. It wasn't anxious. It was electric. We were still talking, trying to figure out what had just happened, when my phone buzzed. It was a personal phone, not my work one. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. "Hello? Ian, thank God." It was the CEO. He sounded like he was having a heart attack. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. "The system is down. The whole legacy platform. It's offline. The alarms are going off everywhere. The clients are calling. It's a catastrophe." I took a sip of my beer. I already knew what had happened. Ethan had a series of automated maintenance scripts that ran every day at a specific time. They required manual authentication from his terminal to complete. If they didn't get it, they would trip a series of security protocols that would take the system offline to prevent data corruption. A dead man's switch. Ethan, sitting next to me, just stared into his glass, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. "That sounds like a problem for Innovatech," I said calmly. "Ian, please," the CEO begged. "You have to help us. Name your price. Just get Ethan to fix it." I looked at Ethan. He just shook his head slightly. I turned my attention back to the phone. "Listen very carefully," I said, my voice turning to ice. "We are no longer your employees. We are now a private consulting firm. My team's emergency rate is $10,000 per hour per person." A choked sound came from the other end. "There is a 24-hour minimum retainer, payable in advance. That's $2.4 million. Wire transfer. Once the funds clear, we will consider looking at your problem. We offer no guarantees." Silence. I could hear panicked shouting in the background on his end. "That's insane!" he finally shrieked. "That's extortion." "No," I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. "That's the price of competence. You decided you didn't want to pay for it on salary, so now you'll pay for it by the hour. You should have thought of that before you listened to Joanna." I hung up the phone. The entire table was quiet, looking at me. Then Eddie started to laugh, a full, deep belly laugh. Soon, we were all laughing. We didn't know if they would pay. We didn't really care. In that moment, we had taken back our power. The fallout was spectacular. They never paid. The CEO's ego wouldn't allow it. They tried to fix the system themselves. For 3 days, the company's entire revenue stream was offline. They lost millions. They tried to hire emergency contractors. The few who were brave enough to even look at Ethan's code quoted them even higher numbers than I had, and then quit after a day, calling the system an unholy Lovecraftian nightmare. The news got out. Tech blogs wrote articles about the mass walkout. Glassdoor was flooded with anonymous, brutally honest reviews detailing Joanna's reign of terror. Key clients, spooked by the multi-day outage and the stories of instability, pulled their contracts. Joanna was fired within 2 weeks, a scapegoat. The CEO was forced to resign by the board a month after that. Within 6 months, Innovatech was a shell of its former self, acquired for pennies on the dollar by a larger competitor just for its client list. And us? The story of our walkout became something of a legend in the local tech community. My phone started ringing off the hook, not from the CEO, but from his competitors. They didn't just want to hire us, they wanted to back us. We pooled our severance, got a small business loan, and took an offer from an investor who loved our story. We started our own consulting firm. We called it Praxis Engineering. Praxis as in practice over theory. We hired back every single one of the 5 guys who were fired. They were our first employees. Our specialty became rescuing companies with complex, critical legacy systems, the kind of systems no one else wanted to touch. We became the team you call when your forward-thinking MBA-led strategy has crashed and burned, and you need someone to actually fix the engine. Our new office is nothing fancy, just a big open room with comfortable chairs, powerful computers, and a lot of whiteboards. There's no HR department. Our only rule is be competent and don't be an asshole. It's been a couple of years now. We're more successful than we ever could have been at the old place. We own our work. We answer to no one but ourselves and our clients. Sometimes, late at night when we're working on a tough problem, one of us will look up and say, "Remember Joanna?" And we all share a quiet laugh. She thought she was ending our careers. She thought she was deconstructing a paradigm. Instead, she just proved what we knew all along. In the end, you can't replace a foundation built on skill and loyalty with one built on buzzwords and ideology. Sooner or later, the whole thing just comes crashing down, and we'll be there to pick up the pieces for a price.